Ooh, another white boy with a podcast. Pronouns, Jim Bro. Another white boy with a podcast. You want to see the video? It went viral.
Hi gains gurus and welcome to TMGP, the Muscle Growth Podcast, episode 27. I am your host, Russo, and today we are welcoming Ava Cowan and James Russo onto the show for part one of their two-part series. Ava and James are key members of Team Biolayne, contributing their expertise to the Muscle Growth Podcast, where they explore various aspects of fitness, nutrition, and muscle development, with a special focus on the most important macronutrient for building muscle, protein. Ava Cowan is a highly accomplished bodybuilder and fitness professional, celebrated for her inspiring journey in health and wellness. Known for emphasizing mental resilience alongside physical strength, Ava shares valuable experiences to motivate others on their fitness paths. Her approach blends evidence-based strategies with relatable insights, earning her respect throughout the fitness community. With countless bodybuilding titles under her belt, Ava truly walks the walk, making her insights invaluable to anyone serious about fitness. James is a senior in the Applied Exercise Science program at Springfield College and has recently applied to UConn's PhD program in nutritional sciences. He is an ISSN sports nutritionist, a natural bodybuilder, and currently serves as a teaching assistant for the sports nutrition course at Springfield. James aspires to become a college professor, focusing on the science of metabolism, optimal protein intake, supplementation, and nutritional needs for bodybuilding. Since July, James has been working closely with Ava Cowan, from whom he has gained invaluable insights into the practical applications of nutritional concepts. He expresses deep gratitude for her mentorship, noting that it has significantly enhanced his understanding of the field. Together, Ava and James provide listeners with a blend of practical knowledge and scientific insight on muscle growth and nutrition, making their podcast episode an essential resource for anyone interested in optimizing their fitness journey. In today's episode, Ava and James dive into a wide range of insights covering both personal journeys and expert knowledge. Some of the topics include James's journey from wrestling to bodybuilding and the challenges and rewards of that transition, Ava's impressive shift from personal trainer to pro figure athlete, including her completion of a rigorous 16-month CPTS program that only 2 or 3 out of an original 60 in Florida managed to complete, Ava's discovery of Layne Norton during his PhD, which led her to compete in Figure Universe, Olympia, and Arnold events, eventually bringing her to work with Team Biolayne, a full circle moment in her career. Ava's latest competitive milestone as a WBFF pro in 2021, the importance of sustainability in fitness and lifestyle choices, the power of visualization, including Layne Norton's famous striated glutes as a motivational tool, deep insights into complete proteins and the essentials, protein, leucine, BCAAs and EAAs, mTOR and its role in muscle growth, the role of amino acids and overall fitness, a fresh perspective on processed foods, emphasizing that processed doesn't mean bad, highlighted by whey as an example of a highly processed but high-quality protein, comparisons of protein sources such as casein, pea, and soy protein, the significance of understanding RDAs, recommended daily allowances, why regular blood work is essential for tracking health and fitness, and so much more. Get ready for a truly informative episode. Hey Gains Gurus, before we dive into today's episode, we have a special shout out to our sponsor, Heart and Mind SA. If you're looking for a delicious way to boost your workouts, their creatine gummies can be found on Takealot and are the perfect fit. They're not just effective, but also a tasty treat you can look forward to every day. So maybe it's time to be like me and fuel your gains with Heart and Mind SA. If you're injured or in recovery, visit theinjuryconsultant.com and schedule a free consultation to explore how I can help you heal, restore, and thrive. The Injury Consultant now also offers specialized packages for fat loss, muscle gain, and longevity. Interested? Book your free consult today. A little disclaimer, this show does not contain medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Muscle Growth Podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect my beliefs or the stance of the podcast. While we aim to provide valuable insights and information, it's important to approach all topics with critical thinking. I encourage you to do your own research, consider multiple perspectives, and form your own conclusions. Healthy discussion is always welcome, and I'm happy to engage with listeners in the comments to continue the conversation. Lastly, don't forget to follow us on all major social media platforms, including Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. Find us at the Muscle Growth Podcast and myself at Reps with Roscoe. Now, let's get back to building muscle with science.
Welcome, Ava and James, to the Muscle Growth Podcast, where we explore subjects related to muscle science and hypertrophy. I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's conversation. Let's jump right in and dig into some exciting topics together. Can you guys briefly introduce yourselves and your journey into the world of fitness and health?
You want to go first, James?
Sure. So I'm James. I'm a senior right now at Springfield College in the exercise science program. Also a recent applicant to UConn's PhD program. So I love all things exercise, especially all things nutrition, and especially all things protein. Definitely my favorite topic. I'm also a certified sports nutritionist, and that's kind of the boring stuff. What people are really interested in is I'm also a natural bodybuilder. So coming into college, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go, which direction I was in. But one thing I always knew is I've always been a very passionate person. Whatever I'm in, I'm always all into it. So I came here for wrestling. I was on the wrestling team for a little while, and it just wasn't really clicking with me anymore. And so it was a really tough decision, but I stepped back from that, and I really loved weightlifting. So within a week of stepping away from wrestling, I signed up for my first bodybuilding show. And I spent all year just researching and digging into it, preparing myself without a coach. First time on stage didn't look great, but it was an incredible learning experience. And I was just hooked. So I spent the rest of my few college years, I mean, I'm still not done, but throughout the process, I got really into exercise science and nutrition. I've been studying it like crazy. I just love it. And that moment really on stage kind of just dictated my life. Like I realized how much I love bodybuilding, and I realized how much I love all of the mechanisms behind it. And that's where I'm kind of going with my life now. So yeah, that's about me.
Well, that's a fantastic story, and I'm glad that it sounds like you found a new passion. How was the transition from weightlifting to bodybuilding? You said you took it up within a week. You decided, cool, I'm doing this. I guess you'd probably been doing weightlifting as training for wrestling beforehand. It wasn't new to you, probably. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I actually I was in high school. I did cross country, track, and wrestling. And it's funny, like I know I mentioned I'm very passionate, but whatever I'm in, like I am all into it. So when it's cross country season, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be the fastest. I'm gonna run as long as I can. Like that's my life, like nothing else. And then season ends and we're in wrestling. All right, wrestling. That's all I care about. And what happened my junior year in high school was it was right after the wrestling season ended. I was super motivated. I did really well, and I was looking forward to my senior year, hopefully making it to states. And then COVID happened, and everything shut down. So I was like, all right, how can I become a better wrestler? So I had some weights in my basement. My dad was teaching me a couple movements, do some lateral raises here, the bench press is how you do that, try squatting. Like, I guess you got to hit legs too. So I started weightlifting, and I was like, man, I really like this. Like, this is a lot of fun. And I started seeing a lot of progress. So I started looking into things like on YouTube. That's how, of course, Lane popped up. That's kind of how Team Biolayne got introduced to me. And I just loved the weightlifting and like what it does to your body. And what was interesting was what I noticed was when I got to college and it was back to wrestling season, right? It was like, okay, so now I got to go back into wrestling. I couldn't get into that zone. I was just like, man, like, well, I'm at practice. Like, I'm tired of being thrown around. Like I want to, I want to go back to the gym. Like that's where I want to be. So I was just so into that I feel like it was just kind of building up inside of me. So when I made the decision to step away from wrestling, it was all right there for me, and it kind of was able to really come out and expose itself. So it was a tough transition at the time, but once I made that decision, I was like in my head, I was already all in. So it kind of worked out pretty well.
Well, that's fantastic and well done on letting it work out and letting it play out. So, do you have a coach now? Since you mentioned you didn't have a coach for your first show, and who is your coach? Is it Ava?
Yeah, yeah. So right now, Ava's actually coaching me to my next show, which will be in April. I'm super excited for. Before that, so like I mentioned, my first show, I coached myself. And then I did another one. I loved it. Like off the bat, I was so obsessed. It was a show, it was an OCB show, hosted by Joe Franco. And I loved it. I was talking to him just more so about the how everything worked, and he offered to coach me because he also promotes shows. He coaches, so he coached me into another show. And then I was with him for a whole nother year. We did another show a year later, and it ended up working out a lot better because I did a proper muscle gaining phase, a proper cut, looked a lot better. And now, going forward, Ava's coaching me to this next one. So pretty excited for what's going to come to stage in April.
Well, that I think is a fantastic intro to yourself, Ava. Thank you, James, for that beautiful intro. Now on to you, Ava.
That was great. Okay, let's zoom time back to, early 2000s. I would say 2001. I made a decision to be a personal trainer. And I thought, well, how am I going to, what do you do to do that? Like, what's the gold standard? How can I be the best kind of thing? And I happened to live in the same city as Fitness Institute International. So Dr. Anthony Abbott and his wife, Jane, they had that school there, like down the street. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so there was like different modules. And, when you put the different modules together, which you have to complete to, I don't know, get your specialization or your certification as a specialist. I was like, well, I might as well just go all in, just like James. I'm like, I'm in. So I started, and I knew in that first class, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the thing, And I wasn't into competing or anything at that time. I just was looking for my career path. So after the first module, I was like, oof, this is really hard. Like, I don't mind challenge. I love challenges. It was exceptionally hard. And I thought, is it just me? And so I would literally study all the time. So if I was not in class, I was studying. And I did that for 16 months, graduated as a CPTS. And all of that gave me so much confidence. I was like, okay, my physique's good. I know I could maybe do something with it. And around that time, that category came out. And I'm like, I would see the magazines, and I saw Monica Brandt. I actually saw Devana Medina, and she was Miss Figure Olympia. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That I can do that. I can do that. I just knew I could do it. So then I had the confidence of having the education piece. At least I could go into the gym, and I knew about resistance training, because if you graduate from that school, there's 100% pass rate with ACSM and NSCA. So I was like, okay, I know how to train. So I didn't get swooped up into too much bro science at the time, though I did want to compete. And so that's the space, and that's what is sort of available in the space of competition prep. So I ventured into a little bit of bro science kind of thing with getting ready for a show, which was very wildly successful for me. And I knew that was it. I competed in 2005, and I won the Southern States overall in my first show. And it was just one of those journeys where like everyone told me not to do it. Like I wasn't, how did they say it? Like I was up against everyone else's limitations and their limiting beliefs. And I didn't understand it because I'm like, no, I'm in shape. I've done everything. I can do this. I really was set in my mind that it was for me. And so nothing anyone said deterred me. And so I did it. And it was basically the highlight of my life, that moment on that stage. And I finally got told yes. It was a yes. Yes, it's you. Yes, you're good enough. And yes, you can do this. And I'm like, okay. It was off to the races. So now that I knew I could do this thing and that everyone said it's a level 5 show, it's too hard, you got to know someone, that's not true. So I was like, now what do I do? Because this is what I want to do for my career. I want to be a pro athlete. But I knew the way that I got ready for that show was not sustainable. I was like, there's just no way. I couldn't put salt on my food. I was cramping up in the gym. And I had enough education to know, I can't, there's something inherently wrong with not salting your food. I'm like, this is just, I can't keep doing this. Though I was so dedicated and driven, I was willing to do whatever I was asked within reason. But so that set me off on a journey to locate a new coach. So on Body Space, I found Dr. Lane Norton. He was actually getting his PhD at the time, and he was a lifetime pro natural bodybuilder. And so the draw for me was, wow, he could get striated glutes natural. I was like, this is crazy. And I'm like, this is the guy. Why is he not huge? But I was a little bit older, you know what I mean? Because I was like, this, how does no one have him or found him? But they had, because he was super popular on the boards, and that was in that time frame. But I was getting ready for Figure Universe, and I needed a coach, and it was drug tested, and so it was like a perfect time, and we went for it, and I won that show, and I worked with him for 6 years. He prepared me for the Olympia stage, the Arnold, and it was just my covers and all kinds of things. And so it brings me all the way back to, I guess, 2022. I was looking for my next phase in life. I had just completed caretaking for my parents for 5 years. So I could not continue my fitness career. It's pretty detailed, but I was just busy doing that. So when that was concluded, I reached out to Team Biolayne, and here I am now. And then James comes into the picture. This is interesting how all this comes full circle. He applied to be an intern, and I'm like, oh gosh, yes. I mean, I just saw so much potential. We got to meet each other. I got to see his work ethic, and in a short period of time, because what's important to me is your integrity and who you are. So it's great, the education and all that, but it's the combination of the mind and the heart and the integrity piece. So that's what I'm looking for. So we started working together, and I was like, hey, actually his internship begins next year. So I thought, how can we start working together maybe before then? Because I could use some assistance with social media and all this. So I thought, hey, can you help me with some posts? So he starts doing a posing post. And like the subsequent post was the protein post. I believe it's near there. It was like creatine. It was very shortly after the posing post, he made that one. And I'm like, ooh, that was great. And that's what got us here right now. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
No, literally, as you said, that is the exact post that I was like, I love this post. Let's have you guys on. And now we're here. So thank you, James and Ava, for that contribution.
Yeah, thank you.
So please excuse my ignorance, but CPTS, I assume that's some kind of personal training certificate.
Certified Personal Training Specialist.
Okay.
So that's what yeah. So you're like, it's basically the top tier of being a personal trainer, but even in that space, there's no like deep regulation, so to speak. Like there's a lot of variation between people who train people. So I just felt it was so hard. I thought, man, I'd learned the anatomy, physiology, kinesiology was very intense. And so, but it was great. So 16 months later, yeah, I was like, it was great because I passed, and there was just 2 of us who completed out of like 62 or 3 people.
I was going to ask, is that the school you mentioned that only 2 out of a class of 60 passed? And it sounds like that's exactly the school it was. The one, did you say in your hometown?
Yeah, I was in Florida. So I went to school there. Yeah.
Wow.
In Boca Raton.
It couldn't have turned out better, hey?
Yeah, it was good timing.
And then, please correct me if I misheard, but did you say in your very first show, the Southern States overall, you won the overall?
Correct. Yes.
In your first show, like the whole thing and your lineup, obviously.
Yes.
Wow.
The whole show.
The whole show. You were the overall winner in your first show.
in my first show
That's
at 33 years
incredible.
old.
Yeah,
I've
my
never,
story isn't that good.
yeah. Oh my word. But I've really that's I think to win I've never heard of someone winning overalls in their first show. So that I think, like you said, after that you were like, wow, I can do this. And I think getting the overall from your very first show, that would definitely lead you into being a pro athlete, which you were up until quite recently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I turned pro in multiple organizations, but the most recent one was 2021 with the WBFF. So I happened to come back into the mix and wanted to compete, and I got my pro card there in 2021, so not too long ago.
Has Dr. Lane Norton been your coach since 2005 when he was studying his PhD? You said you started with him. Has he been your coach all the way along, or have you been with him and then with others, or just with him?
So the 2005 show, he didn't prepare me for. I was the someone else.
Oh, okay.
So I've been with him since 2008.
Okay.
So that was for the Figure Universe. He prepared me for that, and then for 6 years after that. So for the majority of my shows and my meaningful shows, yes. And he's even I've had other coaches, but he was still very much guiding me and helping me for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so with the Figure Universe, you won that show in your lineup or the overall as well?
The overall.
It's just not fair on everyone else.
Well, it's a thing. That's why I know the kind of coach I'm going to be, because I know what it takes to the level of programming the work that's outside of resistance training. It's all the other things you must do if you want to win.
No, absolutely.
So it was pretty deep. It was pretty deep. I knew I was going to win before I went there. So.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Well done. And so how many overalls do you have in your pocket? I can't even remember.
Figure America, Figure Universe. I don't know.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
I don't know.
Your trophy stand must really be struggling to stay up with all those medals, trophies, and everything else.
Well, there's a few of them, but the experience is what's the trophy to me, and what it meant to me to do that, and how meaningful it was, because how hard it is.
Absolutely.
And people don't realize, unfortunately, particularly for women, particularly attractive women, there's this judgment on your physical appearance, not considering the how hard it is. The athletic considerations involved, like it's a sport. It's not, but it's challenging because you have the hair, the makeup, but getting that lean is so incredibly challenging. So sometimes it's not as noted as that, but yes, it was a lot of work and very rewarding.
Well done to you. A huge congratulations on all your achievements. And James, you've got a lot to aspire to there, buddy. So big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I wish you well on that journey, and I hope to see you fulfill all your dreams as well. How would you say, before we get into the protein, which is going to be the main topic for this episode, how would you say you've changed your kind of prepping for shows and your coaching based on your experience, Ava? And for example, you mentioned that you cramped a lot and there was no salt and it wasn't sustainable. How would you say you've changed your view on all of that subsequently?
Wow. I mean, the great thing is that I have the experience of doing it all the wrong ways. I don't think people realize how important that is. Like you better blow it, because you got to know what you don't want to do. And that's what drove me actually to meet Lane, is because I'm like, this can't be right. But basically I do pretty much everything different, opposite from what a lot of competitors do. But I had confidence, because let's remember the visualization that I held in my brain of the striated glutes of Lane. So anytime I was kind of like going, because it's scary, I had success doing the bro science, but again, I was new, and a first show, you can get away with a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's many ways to get across that stage. And so I did, but for sustainability, I had to find a different solution. So, of course, salting my food, learning about macronutrients, learning about not eating just the same foods all the time. Some people that does work for, and it's a great setup and a scheme, or game plan. But for me, I was like, I don't want to be so confined to feel like that I blew it if I'm not eating these exact foods. So I wanted to learn. And that's what I did.
I love that message. And I think a lot of people get analysis paralysis, and they're too scared to make mistakes, and they never actually learn anything because they never try. So I think your message there of being able to get it wrong, still doing really well, even getting it wrong, but then learning from your mistakes is super crucial to anyone looking to embark on their own bodybuilding journey or their own journey of health and fitness, whatever they really want to do, but actually just trying. And then your other point on visualizing something, whether it's Dr. Lane's striated glutes or something else, you've got to visualize something to keep you motivated.
Well, that was only when I was on the fence about what the heck am I doing, because it was in such contrast to what I had done before and had success with. So I was like holding on to understanding that I didn't know what was going on, and I was just you have to let your coach do the job, and you have to go through the process and sort of surrender to it. It's not, you do have to do that. Otherwise it's going to be a constant battle. So I wanted to just see how it went, and it was great. And I thought, well, I was eating a sub sandwich backstage from the day of the show, and everyone else is not drinking water. So it was like, and I had Doritos and all kinds of stuff. So it was like, and I looked incredible. He got me ready. Like he's the best, honestly, in my opinion, but.
Well, it's a good opinion. Definitely one of the best. That's for sure. Yeah, so the last question I have for Ava before we get into the protein topic, how would you recommend for coaches, maybe James one day wants to be a coach, or someone listening who is a coach, how would you recommend coaches deal with difficult clients? Would you recommend that they rather tell the client if they're too difficult to find a different coach, or what is your recommendation for trying to work around difficult clients, or would you just tell them to go find a new coach?
Go find a new coach.
Go find a new coach.
Okay. My life is too I can't because I'm not a therapist, so it would be hard to work.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to work through those,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Those sticking points, like you'd actually have to go, because if it gets to that point, there's something inherently off, like you're not a match. But
Okay.
That's a great question, because I have not had to do that yet, but I would like to move into that and figuring that out. I don't quite know what to do about that, because that's going to happen.
Okay.
So I don't totally know, other than the way it is to be in your life, just upfront, honest, not reactionary, and just be honest with how you feel. That's the best I can suggest.
Well, that's brilliant, and well done on being at Team Biolayne for already, I think, 2 years and not having to drop any clients as of yet. But I
probably should have. I just don't know.
Oh, okay.
Probably. There was a couple that I'm like, I should have maybe said something, and I just sort of don't. But that's something I need to work on, correct? So there's always something to fine tune yourself with. And I think having a difficult conversation would be the next thing I need to work on. Yeah.
I totally understand. And it's great that you are aware of something that you could maybe improve on, and that you're going to be taking that into maybe your future clients. Sorry to any of them that you dropped because of this conversation. No, I'm only teasing. Let's segue into protein biochemistry. I'm going to let James take it from here. I think we're going to talk about protein biochemistry, the protein molecule, general functions and roles, and then muscle protein synthesis. So James, please take it away. And then if there's time at the end, then we'll circle back to some of the other things that we talked about on the pre-topic discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So protein is a pretty unique molecule. One of the 3 macronutrients, along with carbs and fats. What's different about protein is it has a nitrogen component. So our other macronutrients are oxygen, hydrogen, carbon. Protein has, actually, I have it drawn up here. We have a nitrogen component, so it has an amine group, hence amino acids. So we have a carboxyl group, a central carbon, our amine group, and we have an R group on the bottom. That R group is what is going to distinguish which type of amino acid it creates. And there's 20 different types of amino acids. It's very interesting how the body works, because the sequence of these amino acids determines the function of the protein itself. and they function in like everything. It's crazy. Like obviously we're more focused on the contractile tissue. We're talking about muscle. We care about like the actin and myosin. We want to know about how to get bigger muscles. But protein is still, it's involved in enzymes, which are going to facilitate, catalyze different reactions in the body, the immune system, transporting molecules. There's so much that protein does. That's just super interesting. And I could go on about it forever. But if we're talking about muscle protein synthesis, so just to backtrack a little bit, right? We have our amino acids. We have 20 of them, like I mentioned. So 9 of those are essential amino acids. 11 of them are non-essential. What that means is those 9 essential amino acids are going to be things that we need to get throughout our diet because our body can't produce them. And like I was saying before, like since protein's involved in so many different things, we can actually create some of those on our own just by kind of removing the R group, different things that happens with it at a very deep molecular level. But those 9 essential amino acids we cannot synthesize in our body. So we have to get them from the food that we consume. And a protein containing food that has all 9 of these is called a complete protein. So if you ever hear somebody saying like you should be having foods that are, you should be eating more complete proteins, which are going to be more like animal-based products, it's because they have all of the essential amino acids that we need to function properly. And just to narrow that down a little bit more, if we're looking at those essential amino acids, 3 of them are called the branched-chain amino acids. When people hear that, typically they hear of the supplement, they're like, oh, BCAAs, and there's a lot about that people are like, oh, are they helpful? Are they not helpful? If we're looking at it, again, at a fundamental level, right, we need these amino acids, and I'll get into this a little bit later about how they function for muscle growth, but we need them to actually start this process. And when we're specifically looking at stimulating mTOR, building muscle, we need the 3 BCAAs, which are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those 3 amino acids are going to be very high in foods like chicken, in whey protein powders, which, by the way, very processed. So if anybody says processed foods are bad for you inherently because they're processed, BS. Whey protein is one of the most processed things and works pretty dang well for muscle growth, according to the research, the randomized control trials, as Lane would like to say. So when we're looking at the process of muscle protein synthesis, right, there's a lot of different things that happen in the body. But what most people hear, what's trendy, but people have no idea really about how it works, is the mTOR pathway. That is a pathway that is stimulated by a couple conditions that have to be met. And when that's stimulated properly and it's optimized, that is when muscle growth occurs. So for that to happen, we need to have enough energy, which is why when I say energy, I'm talking about calories, which is why when you're deep in a prep, it gets really hard to maintain muscle. Because the goal, if you've seen any bodybuilder a couple weeks out, they're not, adding pounds to their bench or building significant amounts of muscle mass. And of course, like we're talking about natural athletes specifically. But regardless, it's very difficult to build muscle when we're in a caloric deficit. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult because for the conditions of hypertrophy to be met, for mTOR to be stimulated, we need a sufficient amount of energy and we need an adequate amount of amino acids that are available. So that being leucine specifically, which is going to trigger that, and to optimize it, which is obviously not like we don't live in a research lab, but if we all want to know the numbers, 3 meals with 3 grams of leucine, that's going to really optimize that mTOR pathway. So those are the conditions, and we still now need an exercise stimulus to produce that and stimulate this pathway for muscle growth to occur. So when we have enough energy and we have a sufficient amount of amino acids available and we give it that exercise stimulus, now once we finish that workout and we're able to recover, say we just smash legs we're going crazy, like 2 hours in the gym, whatever, doing whatever workout that is properly stimulating enough tension, and we have enough amino acids, whether you had them before or after you work out, which is another topic we'll probably get into later. Um, and those amino acids are available. Once you rest and we're shutting off our other pathways, we're parasympathetic, AMPK is down, mTOR is stimulated. Now we can begin to build muscle and lay down new tissue, which is the overall goal. And it's a constant process that's always happening. So we need a sufficient amount of amino acids constantly, and we need to be exercising constantly. Of course, not too much. There's a balance. And this is where the science, the coaching, the training, and all of this is a science, but also an art that needs to be blended properly. Because we can say, this exact amount of protein during this minute after this exercise, but what happens when I have to drive home after the gym, or what happens if I only have a certain amount of time, or have to pick up my kids from school, or like life has a lot of challenges. So this is where we have to blend the coaching and the art of coaching with the science, which is something that Ava has maybe she won't admit it, but mastered really well. And yeah, I know I got a little bit off track, but yeah, that's what I have to say about protein so far.
I don't think you got off track at all. I think you were very much on track the whole time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But that was fantastic, really. Yeah, we're gonna struggle to get things in time. That already alone was like, there's so much to go through. I'm stuck for where to start, but I'll just start quickly on you mentioned the amino acids. It's so interesting. Literally yesterday, I published an article on Medium under Reps with Roscoe, where I published scientific articles, and literally that was the topic, was amino acids, and going over the 20 different amino acids.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned about processed being bad, as everyone online seems to claim, as it was actually Dr. Lane Norton who mentioned this, that I learned about that buzzword not meaning much, when he mentioned that if you cook your food like on a fire or like on a gas stove or however you cook it, that is no longer raw, and therefore it's processed food, even though it's minimally processed. So it shows you that processing your food is not necessarily bad. As you mentioned, a great example is whey protein, highly processed, but a fantastic stimulus for building muscle, proven time and time again. And also high in leucine, as you mentioned. I just wanted to check, I highlighted leucine as being incredibly important. I think you mentioned the 3-gram leucine study. Was that Professor Brad Schoenfeld? Yes. I think he might have done that study. And I just wanted to check, is there anything else special about leucine? So we know that we think it's important for the mTOR pathway and sufficient energy, that kind of thing. Is there any other reason why leucine, and it's one of the essential amino acids, I believe, and it's one of the branch chain amino acids. Is there any other thing that makes it in particular so important for mTOR stimulation?
Nothing else in particular. The main thing is just making sure there's a sufficient amount of it available to stimulate really the magnitude of that response. So when we're looking directly at mTOR, leucine is going to be one of the main drivers of that. We still need all of the essential amino acids, and that was something else I wanted to highlight, is that like people, and hopefully we'll get to it later, just talking about the like amount that you can take in a meal and use for protein synthesis. But all of these amino acids, like leucine is important and it gets the pedestal by everybody, but all of these other essential amino acids are essential for a reason. And like I highlighted before, transport proteins, enzymes, immune function, connective tissue. There's just so much that protein is involved in. So all of the amino acids have their own role. And when we're building a protein, which, just to go back a little bit, like proteins are made by ribosomes when basically they're coded from the DNA. There's transcription that happens from the DNA to RNA, which is then translated in the ribosome to certain amino acids. And this happens like deep in our cell. And each one of these amino acids is coded for, and it's a specific sequence that makes a specific protein. So every protein has its role, but every amino acid also together, when it's organized in a certain pattern, it gives it a certain function. So we could say like breaking them down at a minimal level is really important for specific things, but also when we're building proteins, we need a specific sequence that is encoded by our DNA into our RNA, that just makes like all these different things do different things in the body pretty much, which is just like, I mean, I'll like nerd out about this all the time, but it's just so interesting to me how like our body just codes things. It's literally like coding it like a certain way, like you're on a computer. It's so interesting to me.
Absolutely, our bodies are total
Yeah.
machines, and they are incredibly complicated, um, and they are so fascinating. And I love your enthusiasm and your passion for the biochemistry and the protein and all of that. And it sounds like you're following Lane Norton's passion for the nutrition and the protein, especially. I think that was his PhD topic, actually, with the dairy industry or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, on the BCAAs, like you've just made it sound like amino acids are so important, and I get that they are. Why, excuse my total ignorance, but why are BCAA supplements considered trash online? Is it purely because we get enough BCAAs from our diet? And how true can that be for everyone? Because I believe that, like you said, leucine is found in meats and proteins and those kind of things. Would that remain true for vegans, or should vegans maybe supplement with BCAAs? And would it actually be a problem with getting EAAs, BCAAs in a supplement, or is it just to do with the bioavailability? Or why is it considered so taboo to get a BCAA product? And some people they still like them, even if it's just expensive flavoring. Or what is your thoughts on BCAA supplements versus EAA supplements versus EAA and BCAA combined, versus why can't we just get a full stack 20 amino acid supplement? Why can't we just get that? Is it to do, does it degrade, or why can't we just have an all-in-one? You're sorted, you take the supplement. And I know that there's a silver bullet that doesn't exist, but why doesn't it? And yeah, can you explain why BCAAs are seen as
Yeah,
trash?
so that's a great question. Really, if you are consuming a diet with complete proteins, an adequate amount of protein, which we'll touch on is really the main driver. Hitting your total daily intake is going to be at the base of that pyramid. That's going to be the most important thing. So if you are, which is most people, if you are consuming adequate protein and your diet consists of a variety of different sources that are complete proteins, you're most likely good. If you are vegan and you're not or there's other foods that you don't eat and you don't get enough of these essential amino acids, then taking an EAA or a BCAA supplement could actually be pretty beneficial for you, because you might not be getting enough of those amino acids, or what we see with a lot of plant-based products, which you touched on, like they're not as bioavailable. Their structure is just a little bit different. It's harder to extract what we want from them. So you might have to increase the amount that you take in, or you could supplement with an EAA powder or something like that, which honestly, like I suggest for a lot of people who are very plant-based or have other restrictions that they won't be getting a lot of complete proteins. They're seen now as trash by most people because most people are getting enough and they're not really making a big difference. Now, when we get really late into contest prep, and like I mentioned before, like one of the primary things for mTOR is sufficient energy. So if we don't have sufficient energy, which Ava knows, like when you're deep into a prep, you're not getting a lot of calories. but you still need, the goal might not be to build more muscle, but to hold on to what you have. It's almost like if you think about a brick wall, right? Like when we're bulking, we're building this brick wall up. And when we're cutting, we're pulling blocks out of the bottom of it because muscle is such a metabolically active tissue that our body is like, let's just take it from here because that's going to, then we won't need to use as much energy. So we need to be getting enough protein to make sure that as the bricks are being pulled from the bottom, we're still stacking them on top just to maintain what we have. So when we're deep into a prep, we might more often go into a negative nitrogen balance or a catabolic state, and we need BCAAs, or not, I don't want to say need, but taking like a BCAA supplement, say when you're training, so that that's available for you to be laying down like immediately, it's not a bad idea. But again, it's not a necessity for people who aren't getting enough. I think it could be a really helpful supplement. But for the majority of people, if you're hitting your total daily protein every day and you're eating a variety of foods that are mostly whole foods just because of, the diverse array of nutrients that you can receive from them, you should be covered for the most part. So if that answers the question.
It does, and brilliantly so. So thank you for that. I just wanted to quickly ask another question. I've heard online, and again, I'm not saying online is a good source of information. It is sometimes, especially if you follow you guys. But people have been saying that plant protein isn't a complete protein, but I've heard subsequently that it is a complete protein. I just wanted you to clear this up. So I've heard now that it is actually a complete protein, and it's making me think that maybe it's just in low amounts and low bioavailability, or a combination of being low amounts and bioavailable. Is that correct? Is it actually a complete protein, or is it actually not a complete protein?
So soy is a complete protein, and quinoa is also a complete protein. Most plant proteins are not. Those are two that, and that's why you'll often see like soy protein powders, or things like that.
And pea protein, because I see that's a popular supplement. Is that complete or not?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I don't want to give a wrong answer.
That's fine, and that's a perfectly valid answer. So thank you for being honest. I love that. That's the best answer you can give when you're not sure. Is just saying, sorry, I'm not sure. But is it to do with the low amounts? So it is complete. You mentioned the soy and the quinoa, but in general, as well, even with those ones, is it low amounts of the amino acids and not as bioavailable as the whey, for example?
Yeah, so relative to things like chicken or whey or casein, it's still a complete protein because it contains all of them. But if we look at and I don't know the exact amounts, but if we look at if we look at a serving of each of them and we look at the amount of leucine content in each of them, there's not going to be as much in those plant-based products. Plus, it is less bioavailable, so it's going to be more difficult to extract as much as we want out of it. So for people who are a completely vegan diet, it's usually taking those EAA supplements could be really helpful, just to kind of make sure you're covered. Almost like with a multivitamin, you could be getting enough of your vitamins and minerals, and of course blood work is going to be the most important thing to say, but you could be getting enough of those, but taking a multivitamin, relatively cheap, it's almost like an insurance policy. If you don't hit it, that multivitamin is going to top you out. And it's the same thing with those, if you're consuming a vegan diet, you could be getting, if you're pairing complementary protein, so almond butter and oats or rice and beans, which are not complete proteins on their own, but when you combine them, we now have a bolus that has all of the amino acids that we need. It's still going to be difficult to get as much, so we might just have to consume more protein to kind of make sure we're covered.
Absolutely. And sorry, last question on the EAAs. I've also heard if you're fasting and going to work out, that maybe EAAs or BCAAs would be a good idea to have pre-gym if you've been fasting. Is that correct? I don't recommend going to gym in a fasted state if you're weight training or if you're doing resistance training, but would that be a good thing to do if you're insisting on not eating before gym?
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad idea because if you once you've been fasting for a while, so sleeping, hopefully you're sleeping enough, and that's another thing that's really important for muscle growth. You've now gone 8, 9, 10 hours without eating, so you're in a very catabolic state, and now you're going to train. You're not going to be maximizing your results. So making sure you have a EAA supplement before could be pretty helpful if you're consistently training fasted, because now you have that source to tap into while you're training. It's going to enter the amino acid pool, so they're available. And right when you're done, now those amino acids are available in the bloodstream and they're ready to be like, all right, let's take me out. I'm ready.
Brilliant. So it is a good idea if you're going to do it fasted, but I assume Ava and yourself would probably not recommend training fasted. Is that correct?
Definitely not. I know some people have some issues with their stomach, and that would be a
Okay.
scenario to bring in the supplementation. If you're not eating, but no, definitely not fasted.
And I like that you caught the edge case there. And again, guys, with everything we say, there are always edge cases. And so don't just take our word for it. You got to use your noggin as well sometimes. On the multivitamin, I know it's easier said than done. On the multivitamin, so it's actually incredible. Another article that I wrote was actually on nutritional reference values, and those are not optimal. There's a big difference between NRVs, which is like the minimum amount not to get like some condition, versus an optimal amount. Do you want to quickly just touch on that, and then we can get on to the next thing, which I believe is protein intake, total intake calculations, significance, and special considerations?
Yeah, so kind of similar actually, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it's similar to protein. When we're looking at like
Okay.
RDAs and things like that, those numbers are, and what a lot of people don't realize, because when we blast out a recommendation to the general public, it's based on enough research, of course, but it's not based on every individual of every demographic in every situation, at every single like number that they could give you. Like if we do, and this is why we need to replicate studies, because if we do, and I think there's something Lane said actually once, like if we do 2 studies, or if we do 1 study and we see like this value is better than this value, all that could mean okay, this is optimal, or that could mean that's just the second worst that it could be, and the lower value is the worst. So we need to replicate these, and a lot of these recommendations are based off of very general numbers that are just to be enough to survive and to not get different diseases, with a lot of vitamins. So it's very individualized. So again, that's why like, getting blood work is really important, because you can see where you're at and what you need. And to circle back to protein, like the recommended daily allowance is like zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is like extremely low. And
Way
it
too
is.
low.
And like, yeah, maybe that's enough to survive, but I think we're all looking to do more than
Barely.
that.
Yeah, you want to thrive, and you're not going to thrive on zero point 0.8 grams. To thrive, I genuinely believe you need decent protein and to work out with resistance training or some form of stimulus for your muscles.
Absolutely.
Ava, on that note, what's the most protein you've ever consumed, like grammage wise, would you say?
To hear Ava's response, you're going to have to tune in again to the next episode of the Muscle Growth Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Muscle Growth Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review. It helps us grow and reach more people just like you. Don't forget to follow us on all major social media platforms, including Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. Find us at the Muscle Growth Podcast and at Reps with Roscoe. For more insights, exclusive content, and full episodes, visit themusclegrowthpodcast.com. Your support truly makes a difference, so please like, share, comment, and follow. We're grateful for every bit of it. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and staying focused on getting bigger, stronger, and better.